6th, 14 a.m., when the captain's voice cut through first class, "Get that monkey back to coach." The stem of my champagne flute snapped. Bubbles streaked my cuff. I didn't move. Neither did anyone else. The attendant, Grace her name tag said, went pale tray, tilting eyes begging me to let it slide. I set the jagged glass base on the armrest, like evidence, and stood. He was close enough for me to see the salt in his eyebrows. "Captain," I said, steady. "Repeat what you just said." He smiled without warmth. "You heard me." My throat burned not with shame, but with something hotter. I'd flown this route every month, paid full fare, built payroll for 300 families. And still to him, I was a trespasser with a boarding pass. Row 2 sucked in a breath. Someone in 3C lifted a phone, angling for courage. The air turned metallic the way it does right before a summer storm. Grace whispered, "Miss Carter, please sit." I didn't. I met the captain's eyes so he couldn't pretend I wasn't human. Then footsteps, a shadow in the doorway. Ethan's voice calm, edged like a scalpel. "Captain, finish your sentence." Every head turned. Mine didn't, yet. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "He never has to." "Captain," he said, smooth as a courtroom record. If there's a second half to that thought, let's hear it now clearly. Captain Jason Whitmore's jaw worked like a man chewing on gravel. Eyes flicked to the epaulets on his shoulders, to the galley camera bubble, to the passengers pretending not to stare. "Sir, please take your seat. We're closing up." "After you address my wife," Ethan said. "By name." "Ms. Carter." Grace managed, stepping forward. "We can—" Whitmore cut her off with a palm. "Mr. Carter." "Reed," Ethan corrected, still gentle. "Ethan Reed." Something shifted. The name didn't land for everyone, but it landed for a few. The guy in 2C, with the watch that costs more than a hatchback. The woman in 3D who'd been filming from her lap. The first officer peeking out of the cockpit, who suddenly stood a little straighter. I kept my eyes on Whitmore. "You demeaned me in front of a cabin full of witnesses," I said. "I'm asking for an apology without qualifiers." He smirked the way men smirk when they believe consequences are for other people. "If you people are always listening for insults, you'll always hear them." "You people." He said it like a reflex, a muscle he'd trained. The woman in 3D spoke without standing. "I'm an employment attorney. My name is Eleanor Price. I heard you." Phones rose like prairie grass in the wind. A little red dot glowed on more than one screen. Ethan slipped his phone from his blazer pocket and tapped eyes, never leaving Whitmore. "Matthew Lang," he said to me just loud enough for everyone within 3 rows to hear. "CEO of NorthStar Air." He put the call on speaker and let it ring. Whitmore laughed. "You think the chief executive—" "Matthew," Ethan said when the line clicked, "it's Ethan Reed." A beat of silence. Then a voice that belonged on earnings calls, smoothed with media training, but now thin with alarm. "Ethan, we're expecting you in the lounge." "I'm at the door of your plane," Ethan replied. "First class, row 2. Your captain just called my wife a monkey and told your crew to send her to coach." The first officer flinched, then stepped fully into view. His nameplate read H. Alvarez. He looked sick. Lang's voice flattened. "Tell me you're exaggerating." Eleanor raised her hand like they were in court. "Eleanor Price, California Bar 236. I'm a witness, word for word. And so am I." 2C added, angling his camera toward the aisle. "Different angle." A hush. The kind that carries. Ethan didn't blink. "Matthew, Horizon Dynamics is scheduled to close on NorthStar in 10 hours. We're about to be partners unless you show me you can act." On the phone, papers rustled. A second voice murmured someone in legal. Then tight, "Hold the line." The call went to hold music that had never sounded so bleak. Whitmore blew air through his nose. "You can posture all day, Mr. Reed. There are procedures. There's a union. I have a schedule." "Henry," I said softly to the first officer using the name on his plate, "does a slur from the captain meet the threshold for removal before departure?" He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Whitmore spun. "Don't you dare." The hold cut off. Lang was back, not alone. "This is Matthew with Victoria Hale, chair of our board, and legal on the line. Captain Whitmore, per company policy, 4.26 and FAA Part 121 authority, delegated to operations, you are relieved from duty pending investigation. First Officer Alvarez, you're to assume command until a reserve captain arrives. Gate security will meet you at the jet bridge, captain. Surrender your badge." Whitmore's face went from flushed to ash. You can't do this over a call. Jason, a new voice, interjected, crisp female iron under velvet. Victoria Hale, you've been on our radar. There are documented complaints. You are done. Walk off the aircraft. Grace didn't breathe. No one did. Then 2C whispered, Holy. Whitmore looked around for a lifeline and found none. His eyes landed back on me, on Ethan, on Grace. The mask cracked. This is what happens, he said, voice low and ugly, when the mob runs corporations. Ethan stepped closer, not enough to crowd, just enough to make his next sentence land. No. This is what happens when a company decides to protect its customers and crew. Security appeared in the doorway like the universe had been cued. 2 officers in airport blues. Whitmore's swagger returned in a last misfired spark. I'll own this airline by Friday, he muttered as he shouldered past. Wrongful termination. Discrimination against? Jason, Victoria said from the phone, almost bored now. Please stop talking. He went. The sound of his roller bag thunking down the jet bridge was louder than the engine hum. For 3 seconds, the cabin was a cathedral. Then the spell snapped Whisper's release valves, hissing at once. Grace exhaled a sob she tried to hide and failed. I handed her a napkin from my armrest like it was the most normal thing in the world. Ms. Carter, she said, I'm sorry. I should have pushed back when he asked me to double-check your boarding pass. You followed an order from a superior, I said. That's a system problem, not a you problem. And I meant it. Eleanor leaned into the aisle. Good that legal is on, she said to the phone. You'll need to preserve evidence, cockpit, audio cabin, CCTV crew messages, gate agent notes, complaint logs tied to this tail number. Chain of custody, please. We're on it, a lawyer's voice replied. Ethan ended the call and pocketed the phone. Matthew wants us in the lounge after pushback, he said to me. He knows this isn't a single bad apple story. The man in 4A cleared his throat loud enough to be a statement. So we're all delayed because somebody couldn't take a joke. Eleanor turned calm as a judge. Federal law doesn't treat racial slurs as jokes in the workplace, and an aircraft cabin is a workplace. You want the statute numbers or the summary? 4A's mouth opened, then shut. His wife tugged his sleeve. First Officer Alvarez took the handset. His voice came through the intercom steady as a metronome. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer. We've had a personnel change and are awaiting a reserve captain. We estimate a 45-minute delay. Thank you for your patience. Groans because humans are human. But under the groans, a different current moved, 1 part relief, 1 part reckoning. Grace brought me a club soda and set it on a coaster like a peace offering. Her hand shook. Ms. Carter, there have been things, she said carefully, eyes flicking toward the cockpit, toward the galley where a senior male attendant stared at a spot on the wall. He didn't start today. I know I said and saw her blink. It wasn't that I had proof yet. It was that rot never starts with the branch that finally snaps. The reserve captain arrived 27 minutes later. Breathless uniform, crisp skin, the rich brown of polished walnut. He introduced himself first to Grace, then to us. Captain Henry Alvarez, he said, and my eyebrows rose. Same last name, brothers. Henry caught the look. Cousin, he said with a small smile. Long story. He turned serious. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Reed, on behalf of our crew, I'm sorry. Thank you for taking the leg, Ethan said. Happy to get you there, he replied, then lowered his voice. And for what it's worth, this has been brewing. People will talk now. As he stepped into the cockpit, a chime rippled across the cabin notifications, firing on half a dozen phones at once. The woman in 3D, Eleanor, tilted her screen toward me. A post already had 50,000 views text overlay on a shaky video. NorthStar Air captain calls black woman a monkey in first class. My face was cropped, tight jaw set. Whitmore's profile was unmistakable. The caption, not on our watch. Grace's supervisor, Patricia Silver hair in a clean bun, eyes that had seen every kind of passenger approached with bottled water, and the tired dignity of a woman who has held entire planes together with a smile. Ms. Carter, Mr. Reed. She said there are crew who have tried to report things. Files vanish, schedules change, people get moved. By whom Ethan asked no heed in it, just data collection. Patricia hesitated. Names are above my station, she said, but you'll find them if you look. We will, I said. The intercom dinged again. Captain Alvarez's voice deeper, warmer. Folks, we're closed up. Wheels up in 5. I know you didn't plan for a delay. Thank you for showing each other patience. As we taxied, 4A muttered something about cancel culture. The middle-aged black man across the aisle, who'd been quiet the whole time, leaned forward and spoke with the softness of Sunday school. Sir Culture didn't cancel that man, he said. His mouth did. Takeoff pressed us into our seats. The city fell away. Sunrise burnished the wing. The moment the chime released us, Ethan opened his laptop. 2 emails, he said. One to our legal team, due diligence scope just expanded. One to Matthew, the merger terms will now include structural remedies. What kind, I asked, though I already knew. We'd lived this playbook in other industries. Independent audit of complaints. Real authority for an external oversight council. Promotion and hiring reviews with teeth. Funding for past harm. Training that changes behaviour, not just slide decks. He paused. And leadership changes where the trail leads. Good, I said. Eleanor slid her card across the armrest. If you need sworn statements, she said, I'll coordinate witnesses. People are less brave alone. Thank you, I told her, for speaking up when it mattered. She shrugged. I teach my associates if you wait for the perfect moment, you'll miss the necessary one. Some passengers avoided our eyes. Others gave the barely their nod you give strangers at funerals and weddings, moments when you're bound by what you've all seen. Grace brought me a fresh napkin for the champagne stain. I folded it neat corners like order could be coaxed back by symmetry. Ethan glanced at me. You okay? I thought of Memphis summer heat scholarship forms. Harvard winters, the clients who stopped assuming I was the assistant when they saw our balance sheet. I thought of every time I'd weighed whether dignity or safety would cost less that day. I'm angry, I said, and very clear. He nodded a promise tucked behind his eyes. Hold that, we'll need it. We landed not on a verdict, but a pivot. A line had been drawn publicly, irrevocably. The man with the epaulets had been walked off before we left the ground. That wasn't closure. It was ignition. Cruising altitude came with a hush I didn't trust. The wing glowed like a blade in the sun, and the cabin settled into that empty rattle of ice in real glass. Ethan typed. I watched people watch us. The older man from 4A, Mr. Thickskin, kept glancing over lips pressed thin, his wife smoothing the same corner of her scarf over and over. A soft chime, then Patricia's calm voice. If there is a medical professional on board, please ring your call button. Everything inside me rekeyed. Grace was already moving. 4A had gone grey at the edges, right hand clutching the centre of his chest as if pinning himself to the seat. His wife whispered his name, Don, like a prayer. I stood without thinking and slid into the aisle to give Grace space. Oxygen, she told Patricia, already gloving up. BP cuff. AED on standby. A woman farther back, mid-30s and athleisure hair, in a neat coil, lifted a hand. I'm an ER nurse, she said, voice low and certain, stepping forward. Captain Alvarez came on the intercom. We're coordinating with a physician on the ground. Flight attendants proceed per protocol. The nurse knelt hand steady on 4A's wrist. Sir, can you take a slow breath for me? His eyes were wide with the panic of a man realizing his body is not obeying. Grace gave me a quick look. Stay, don't crowd. And then eased the oxygen mask over his face. The AED sat in its red case by her knee like a threat and a comfort. I slid into the row beside the wife. I'm Sophia, I said. I'll sit right here with you. She clutched my hand with surprising strength. He says he's fine until he isn't, she whispered. He hates doctors. Her eyes flicked to my face, and away shame flushing across her cheeks as memory dragged her back to his comment from the gate. I squeezed her hand anyway. The nurse called out numbers. Grace answered with tools. Patricia relayed to the cockpit. You could feel the cabin recalibrate. Every grievance shrinks in the presence of mortality. 3D's camera lowered. 2C set his phone face down. The hum of recirculated air sounded like a held breath. Captain Patricia said into a handset, We're stable for now. Continue. Alvarez came back. Folks, we are monitoring a medical situation. We'll keep you updated. Thank you for staying seated and allowing our crew to work. Thank you, I said to Grace. She nodded once the way professionals nod when there's no ribbon to cut, only work to do. Ethan's phone vibrated against the armrest. A new email notification flashed across his lock screen. No name, just a burner address, and a subject line that chilled me: Hangar Club internal threads and complaint IDs. He opened it. Plain text, no greeting. You don't know me. I used to be in HR at NorthStar. Search your due diligence portal for these complaint numbers: 19441, 2112, 2139, 23077. Cross-reference with the Hangar Club chat on Workplace. They bury everything. Save your wife. Save our people. Raven. 4 complaint IDs. A screenshot attached, cropped, time-stamped, unmistakable. A group chat titled Hangar Club thumbnail of a beer stein and a propeller. Names under the banner: Robert Pierce, Chief Pilot, Thomas Green, yes, the PR head, Jason Whitmore. 2 base managers and a handful of senior captains. The visible slice showed a string of memes about quota hires and mystery meet in first class, with Whitmore chiming in. Coach is the right habitat. Pierce had responded with a laughing emoji and the words, "Keep the optics clean, boys." Green added, "Please do not post this stuff. Call me instead. Call me instead. Not stop it. Not this is wrong. Call me." Ethan and I looked at each other, the same 2-word conversation passing in both directions. It's bigger. He forwarded the email to our legal chief with 3 words: preserve. Subpoena. Now. Across the aisle, the ER nurse nodded. Pain's easing, she said to Grace. Could be anxiety riding high blood pressure. He needs a cardiologist, but I think we can keep flying. The wife's grip softened around my hand. Her eyes filled. I'm sorry, she whispered, and the apology was for more than this moment. My husband, he talks like his father. People talk like rooms let them, I said. That can change. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. She dabbed her eyes, tucked the tissue into her sleeve like a note. The cabin's Wi-Fi pushed new alerts like hail against glass. Captain removed before takeoff. Horizon CEO on board. NorthStar meltdown. My name wasn't in the headlines, only in captions, Black Executive. I exhaled slowly. To some eyes, that would be credential enough. To others, a provocation. Eleanor slid into the empty edge of our row. I'm seeing something ugly spin up, she said in a whisper. A pack of accounts calling this a hoax. New talking point is the video is out of context and that you hit him first figuratively. Let it run, I said. Truth ages well. Ethan's phone lit again. Matthew Lang. He answered. Tell me you've seen your HR numbers, Ethan said, skipping the greeting. And tell me you're not in that Hangar Club thread. Silence. Then a careful practiced line: I'm aware of a flight ops social group. I'm not a member. Send what you have. Ethan read from the email. The names, the complaint IDs. He didn't raise his voice. You don't yell at a man who's already hearing a siren. Thomas Green is not flight ops, I added, leaning toward the mic. He's your PR head. If he's in that chat, it's because the problem was known and managed, not corrected. Lang exhaled the sound of a tower, realizing the fire alarm isn't a drill. I'll convene the board in San Francisco. We'll lock down systems and preserve data. You'll also suspend anyone in that thread pending investigation, Ethan said. Today. I don't have a roster that complete. Start with the names on the screenshot you've now received, Ethan replied. The steel in his voice was new and precisely tempered. We'll assume good faith until we can't. Lang didn't argue. Understood, he said. I'll call you when you land. He hung up. I watched the ER nurse smile at Foray's wife. He's talking about grandkids, she said. That's a good sign. Mr. Thickskin breathed through the mask and avoided my eyes. I didn't need him to meet them. Not yet. The plane felt smaller and larger at once, like we were all inside something, and also being watched by a crowd we couldn't see. That crowd was already picking sides, writing think pieces none of us had time to read. Another bing. This time, a push alert from Aviation Wire Pilot Union Issues statement, due process for Captain Whitmore. The paragraph was familiar respect record, waiting for facts. It wasn't wrong. It just wasn't complete. Facts lived in places. Statements didn't reach hanger jokes. Text threads, memos with subject lines like optics. Eleanor sighed. The union will protect the process. They have to. What you're doing is building the record that process will have to weigh. Grace returned with 2 water bottles and a square of club soda on a napkin to dab at my pants leg. "Ms. Carter," she said shyly, "you didn't have to sit with his wife." "Sure I did," I said. "We still live together on this little rock." She looked like she wanted to hug me and also cry again. Instead, she did what professionals do, she fixed what she could reach. Ethan scrolled the burner email again, and a second attachment I'd missed resolved a spreadsheet complaints by number, date, location, outcome. The last column repeated like a drum beat. Closed insufficient evidence. Closed coaching provided. Closed customer voucher issued. The few that weren't closed had notes like resolved informally or moved to different base. More than one referenced Captain J. Whitmore. One referenced denied promotion H. Alvarez. My stomach tightened. Henry. It was a different Henry Alvarez, the captain, or a typo on the first officer names could be duplicated. Still, the pattern was their pressure applied in the same direction over years with intent. "James will pull the entire dataset when we land," Ethan said, tapping the screen. "We'll ask for a litigation hold today and a forensic copy of Workplace. Bring in a third-party e-discovery firm," I said. "No one touches the evidence who also reports to the people in the screenshots." He grinned sideways. "You sound like a general counsel." "I sound like a woman who has watched excuses age into policy." From up front, Captain Alvarez's voice again. "Folks, quick update on our medical situation. Thanks to an onboard nurse and our flight attendants, our passenger is stable. We're coordinating a paramedics meet at the gate." The cabin exhaled as one. 4A's wife squeezed both my hands now. "Thank you," she whispered, cheeks wet, "for staying." "You're welcome," I said. "You did the hard part." Mr. 4A turned his head mask, fogging at the edges. He looked at me the way people look at photographs of themselves from before they knew better pain and a bruise of regret. He mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded once. Forgiveness is a long road. Recognition is the driveway. Another alert, this one from a cable network. Split screen of Whitmore calling in from a parking lot, jaw tight, an American flag behind him. The Chiron reading veteran pilot fired mid-flight speaks out. I clicked sound off. We'd watch it later with counsel. For now, I catalogued his eyes, the ticks in his mouth, the words he'd reach for because men like him always reached for the same ones. Eleanor leaned back. "Brace for the narrative war when we land," she said. "You're going to be asked to sit for an interview before the jet bridge." "We'll speak," I said, but not to add oxygen to his match. My gaze fell to the napkin in my lap, damp, and folded into a perfect square. I unfolded it and dabbed the stain again, slower this time. Sometimes doing the small, careful thing keeps you from breaking the big, necessary one. Grace checked her watch. 22 minutes to initial descent, she said. "We'll start securing the cabin at 12. Ethan closed his laptop. "When we step off, everything changes," he said softly. "It already has," I answered. "We just get to decide whether it changes with our hands on the wheel." I looked down the aisle at Grace tying back her hair, at Patricia making notes on a manifest, at the ER nurse tucking the AED away at Eleanor, capturing a still of the cable Chiron for the record. A plane full of strangers had been forced into a story together, and the chapter we didn't plan had arrived a heart stuttering, a secret surfacing, a company suddenly out of places to hide. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a small, authoritative chime. I fastened mine and laced my fingers with Ethan's. Out the oval window, the light had shifted, no longer harsh, but strong. It made the wing look less like a blade and more like a hand. Initial descent began with the soft pitch change. I've always loved a plane lowering its shoulders. Grace moved down the aisle collecting glassware. Patricia followed with a quiet thank you that seemed to mean more than beverage service. 4A had his colour back. The mask was gone. He wouldn't meet my eyes, but his wife did, steady, grateful, changed. I felt the shift inside me too. For years, I'd budgeted my responses to prejudice like line items on a spreadsheet address. What you must ignore the rest, conserve energy for the real work. But watching a man wheeled between life and death 3 rows away, while a screenshot of a poison chat group bloomed on my husband's phone, cracked something open. It wasn't that I was more outraged. It was that outrage suddenly felt too small. You don't remodel rot. You strip it to the studs so the house stops making everyone sick. Grace reached my row hands, no longer shaking. Miss Carter, she whispered, people tell us to be professional, which somehow always means be quiet. When you didn't sit down, it gave me permission to stand up. Keep standing, I said. We'll build you a floor to stand on. Her smile trembled into something fiercer. I will. Wheels kissed runway. The cabin clapped without consulting its self-relief habit, a little gratitude aimed at whomever. Captain Alvarez's voice came over the speakers warm. Welcome to San Francisco. Please remain seated while we coordinate paramedics and a slightly livelier than usual gait. The jet bridge thumped. Before the seatbelt sign pinged my phone lit with a text from Matthew Langboard, assembling in VIP lounge. Media outside. I propose joint remarks with you and Mr. Reed before we meet. Another text followed, Thomas Green will brief you. I looked at Ethan. He showed me his screen. Our legal chief had already replied to the Raven email CCing forensics, drafting litigation hold language, lining up an outside e-discovery firm. Motion in every direction. Thomas Green materialized like a stage cue as soon as first class stood. Press badge on a lanyard. Expensive concern arranged on his face. Ms. Carter, Mr. Reed, he said, hand extended. Ethan didn't take it. Neither did I. Thomas Ethan said pleasant, as a glass door. Are you Hanger Club, Thomas? The one who typed, please do not post this stuff. Call me instead. He blanched the way people do when their old jokes crawl out into new light. Either a screenshot circulating without context. My note was crisis mitigation, keeping inappropriate chatter off official systems. Not stopping it, I said. Rerouting it. I watched the sentence hit him like altitude change. He reached for the old script optics process values and came up empty. Thomas, a voice cut in behind him. Victoria Hale. Board chair. In person, now not disembodied iron. You're not the messenger for this portion. She turned to me, to Ethan. We're moving to suspend any executive named in those threads pending review. I'd like your counsel to observe preservation and access controls. We will do this correctly. The hallway outside the jetway churned with cameras' boom mics, the near-physical tug of a narrative trying to claim us. I'd prepped for this kind of gauntlet before earnings lawsuits market panics, but never with my own dignity as the lead exhibit. I glanced back into the cabin. The ER nurse was packing the AED. 4A's wife hugged her with the intensity of a second chance. Grace lingered in the galley thumb, tapping the edge of her manifest like a tell. Eleanor slid a hand to the small of my back, not to guide me anywhere, but to remind me I wasn't walking alone. Joint remarks, Ethan said, reading my face. Outside, not tucked away. Short and about systems, not heroes. And not about me, I added. About what needs to change to keep people safe from slurs, from retaliation, from the quiet corrosion that makes a plane less humane than it could be. We stepped out. The wall of sound, swelled questions poured like gravel. Did the captain really say, are you using this to influence the merger? Are you playing the race card? Is NorthStar a racist airline? I let the noise break across me and then lifted a hand. My name is Sophia Carter, I said, voice even Mike Forrest, tilting toward me. A NorthStar captain dehumanized me before we left the ground. The company acted to remove him today. That's the start of accountability, not the end. What matters now isn't my personal outrage. What matters is whether NorthStar and the industry will fix the systems that let a moment like that feel safe to the person who said it. Ethan took one mic left, others dangling. Horizon Dynamics intends to proceed with our deal only under conditions that include independent audits, an external oversight council with authority, transparent reporting of complaints and outcomes, protection for whistleblowers, and real consequences for anyone who buries or minimizes harassment or discrimination. We are not here to burn the house down. We're here to rebuild it with better fireproofing. A reporter shouted about cancel culture. I didn't sigh. Consequences are not cancellation, I said. They are how communities teach themselves what they value. We value passengers arriving with their bodies and dignity intact. We value crew who can work without fear. Victoria stepped to the microphones, not defensive, not groveling. On behalf of NorthStar's board, I am committing to those structural remedies, she said. Effective today, we are placing named executives on leave pending investigation, instituting a litigation hold across relevant systems, and inviting Horizons Counsel to observe. We will release anonymized quarterly complaint statistics, and we will fund a restorative program for employees and customers harmed by our failures. That word failures rang. Ownership, not spin. The crowd adjusted. Inside the VIP lounge, the noise thinned to carpet and glass. Matthew Lang looked 10 years older than his headshot. He extended a hand not to shake, but palm up like an offering. I should have seen it, he said. I saw emails. I rationalized. I told myself we were too busy flying planes to litigate culture every hour. He swallowed. That's leadership malpractice. Seeing is expensive, I said. Not seeing costs more. He nodded, then gestured to the room. First Officer, now Captain Henry Alvarez, sat at one end with a folder on his lap. Fingers pressed white at the tips. Patricia and Grace had been invited too, which surprised me until I remembered whose eyes saw the most. Eleanor took a chair by the wall legal pad ready. Captain Alvarez, I said, meeting his gaze. I saw your name in a complaint about a denied promotion. I don't know if it was you or another Alvarez. Either way, I'd like to hear what advancement has looked like in your cockpit. He inhaled, choosing risk. 18 years, he said. Clean record. Simulator instructor. I've been told I'm steady, dependable, a rock. Then the board posts go to men with shorter tenures who golf with the right people. When I asked why I got phrases, culture fit, legacy expectations, be patient. Did you file? Eleanor asked gently. Once, he said. Closed as insufficient evidence. My chief pilot called me the next day to ask if I was okay and to suggest a different base. This is the moment when old me would have filed the detail and moved to the next bullet. New me felt the shape of that suggestion like a hand at the small of my back. Be grateful, be quiet, be elsewhere. I was done being elsewhere. Henry, I said, you're going to see a process with teeth. And if anyone retaliates, we will treat that as the more serious offense. Grace cleared her throat. There's also a club, she said carefully. Senior guys. They call themselves the Hanger. If they like you, problems evaporate. If they don't, you run into invisible walls. Thomas Green, still hovering at the edge like furniture that expects to be moved, flinched. Victoria didn't look at him, which felt like part of the verdict. We will map those walls, she said. Then we'll take them down with documentation, not rumour. Matthew set his hands on the table, palms flat. What else must change? He asked me to Ethan to the room. I didn't look at Ethan first. I answered from the place that ached. Publish a ladder, I said. Spell out the steps to every role with objective criteria and post the names of the panel who made each decision. Randomize layovers and routes that have historically been used to reward loyalty to people instead of performance. Move bias training from a 3-hour annual scold to embedded practice peer observation, real-time feedback consequences. Give crew a protected hotline to an outside firm and report statistics publicly. And I paused. Seat diversity on your safety committee. Culture is safety. Ethan added the teeth. Tie management compensation to measurable cultural targets the way you do on-time performance. Miss them, miss your bonus. Miss them twice, miss your job. Silence settled, not defensive absorbing. Matthew's shoulders dipped, then squared. Done, he said. And for once, the word didn't sound like a press release promise. It sounded like a man stepping into a colder, cleaner river. Perspective kept shifting in real time. 4A's wife knocked softly on the lounge door with the ER nurse at her side. We were told to wait, she said, but I wanted to say, she looked at me at the crew. I believed my husband's stories about the world. Today, I saw other people's reality. I won't unsee it. The ER nurse smiled. That's how it starts. 4A himself stood behind them, pale but upright paramedics flanking him. He met my eyes and didn't look away. Ms. Carter, he said, voice rough as runway. I'm sorry for my words earlier. They weren't a joke. They were a habit. I'll write a statement if it helps. People like me need to hear it from people like me. I let the apology land. Thank you, I said. Use your second chance well. When they left, Eleanor closed her notebook. I can bring forward half a dozen witnesses within 24 hours, she said. More if you give them cover. You have it, Victoria replied. We were still in the storm, but the air smelled different ozone after lightning. My perspective had shifted from survival to stewardship. For years, I'd been the exception who proved some people's comfortable rule. See, she made it. The system works. Now I understood the responsibility that came with that exception more clearly than ever. My job wasn't to keep proving I belonged. It was to widen the doorway and reinforce the beams so others could walk through without bleeding. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table, quiet as always. Ready, he asked. Yes, I said. For the hard part. The part where a story stops being a headline and starts being homework with deadlines and names attached. Outside the lounge, cameras still fed their endless appetite. Inside, we set the table for the work. I no longer wanted an apology. I wanted an audit, a monitor, a ladder, and a memory, a corporate one, that would not forget what it had learned when the plane descended and the house started to rebuild. The room didn't feel like a boardroom anymore. It felt like scaffolding. We weren't swapping press lines. We were drafting a frame that could hold people without hurting them. Here's the chance, Ethan said, sliding a clean sheet to the middle of the table like a runway. We stop treating this as crisis triage and start treating it as design. Design of what Matthew asked. Trust, I answered. Built like an aircraft, redundancies, checklists, audits, and a cockpit voice recorder that never ever malfunctions when the culture hits turbulence. Eleanor tapped her pen. Then you need pillars that survive leadership changes. Program names, public artifacts, and clocks that can't be turned back without leaving fingerprints. Victoria nodded once. Give me the pillars. First, I said, a passenger dignity bill. Plain posted in every cabin and airport gate. Not lawyerese. The promise you'll be treated as a person, not a profile. If we violate that, here's how you report it, who sees it, and when you'll hear back. Grace glanced at Patricia, then at me. Crew need one too. Second, Ethan continued, an open sky dashboard. Quarterly numbers, published complaints, received categories, outcomes, time to resolution, discipline imposed. Anonymized, where necessary, transparent by default. Third, Eleanor said, an external oversight council. Diverse by profession and background. Subpoena-like access under the merger agreement. Authority to refer misconduct straight to the board. I'll serve if asked, and I'll bring 2 people the company can't buy. I added, fourth, a ladder map. Every role, every step, objective criteria, panel names for each decision, and an appeal process that doesn't route back to the same people who said no. Henry lifted his folder. Make training real, he said. Not slides. Scenario sims. Pair captains who've been told they're flawless with peers who will give them the truth. Tie completion to currency, not convenience. Ethan wrote 5th, practice that changes behavior. And 6th, he said, looking at me, a Raven protocol. Anonymous reporting that actually stays anonymous, administered by a third party we pick together. Anti-retaliation that bites automatic escalating sanctions if patterns suggest payback. Victoria didn't pretend not to recognize the name. To the person who sent those screenshots, she said to the room, and maybe to a camera, we couldn't see if you're listening, we heard you. We're building a door you can walk through without losing your livelihood. Matthew sat back, eyes on the ceiling grid, like it could help him reorder his past. And the Hangar Club. Make sunlight policy, I said. Any executive-only chat about people or policy lives on systems with retention and audits. No side channels. Anyone who steers misconduct into the dark loses the keys to their office. Thomas Green inhaled to object. Victoria raised a palm. This is not the hill for optics, Thomas. This is the hill for ethics. He closed his mouth, color high in his cheeks. Ethan drew a box and wrote a 7th heading, accountability with teeth. Management comp tied to these metrics, he said. Miss them, miss your bonus. Miss them twice, we revisit fit. 8th, I added a bridge program. We'll fund jointly scholarships, paid internships, and flight school tuition for people shut out by cost or gatekeeping. 50 a year to start. Pair each with a mentor who can't be their evaluator. Grace's chin lifted. Put line crew and gate agents on the design team, she said. Front line sees the gaps first. Done, said Matthew, and meant it. A knock at the glass, the union rep for pilots. Adrian Cole, mid-40s sleeves, rolled eyes scanning like he'd never learned to sit through meetings without mapping exits. He'd been briefed. He took the empty chair palms open. "My membership will fight you if this looks like a witch hunt," he said. "They will also back you if this looks like due process with evidence. Build guardrails so we don't replace one kind of abuse with another." Eleanor met him halfway. "We anchor in documentation and right to respond," she said. "But we stop confusing longevity with virtue. The cockpit isn't penance-proof." He studied her, then me, then Henry. "We can work with that," he said. "And for what it's worth, some of the loudest critics in my ranks are tired of being embarrassed by men who make their epaulets look small." The opportunity kept widening. PR wanted to talk message. I wanted to talk memory. "Create a standing ritual," I said. "Every new hire class listens to recorded stories from employees who were pushed out, passed over, or harmed here. Not to shame, so no one can say they didn't know what silence costs." Patricia's pen stilled. "I'll tell mine," she said, "with names." Victoria wrote a note and underlined it twice. Matthew rubbed his temples. "Share price will dip," he said. "Analysts will say we're distracted. Some customers will boycott, others will boycott the boycott." "Long-term," Ethan replied, "retention improves litigation, risk drops. Brand equity grows with a spine. Wall Street likes predictability. A culture that hides rot is a volatility machine." "And safety," Henry added softly. "When people aren't looking over their shoulder, they look at the sky. We want that." 2 hours became 3. Legal drafted language. IT began the preservation. The board secretary created a live document called the NorthStar Rebuild. I suggested a shorter name. "Call it Clear Air," I said. "Everyone knows what air feels like when it's clean." "Clear air it is," Victoria said with the smallest smile. The door cracked. The ER nurse from the flight still in athleisure poked her head in. "Sorry," she said. "Grace said I could pass a message. Our guy Don has a normal rhythm. He's on his way to the hospital in good hands." I stood. "Thank you for what you did up there." She shrugged. "We do it together, or we don't do it at all. Then, after a beat, I'd join your council. Nurses know culture. We live at its fault lines." "Leave your info," Victoria said instantly. When she left, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Raven here. Saw the presser. If the protocol is real, I'll root more. There's a spreadsheet called Snow Day on Legal's shared drive. Start there." A second message followed. "I'm terrified." I typed back, "Fear says the door matters. We'll hold it open." Adrian stood. "I've got to brief my members," he said. "One ask, don't spring this as punishment. Present it as maintenance. We're pilots. We believe in checklists." "Then we'll write one," Ethan said. "The Clear Air checklist." By late afternoon, we had a timeline temporary suspensions where the paper trail warranted, a 90-day audit with a reputable outside firm, a 120-day launch of the dashboard, whistleblower protections effective immediately, and a joint letter to employees acknowledging failures and spelling out change. Not hope commitments. Matthew looked at the clock. 6 hours until the scheduled merger announcement, he said. "We'll move it to noon tomorrow. We pair it with Clear Air. If we're doing this, we want to be seen doing it." I thought of the thousands of small acts that would follow any press conference schedulers not punishing a complaint with a worse route, a chief pilot stopping a joke before it reached the punchline, an agent believing a woman's story without asking her to perform outrage to qualify for help. Opportunity is a door, yes, but it's also 100 hinges that need oil. In the hallway, cameras waited. Inside, we were still making the future's bones. Grace stood to go. She'd volunteered to sit on the crew council. At the door, she hesitated. "Ms. Carter," she said, "if you could wave a wand and change one thing we can feel tomorrow, not 6 months from now, what would it be?" Tomorrow, I said, every supervisor in this company asks their team one question. "What do you need from me to feel safe enough to do your best work?" Then they write the answers down and send them upstairs without editing. Grace grinned. "Copy that." We stepped back into the corridor. In the glass, I caught my reflection hair slightly undone suit wrinkled at the knee from the emergency row crouch eyes steady. Crisis had carved out an unexpected room in me. Not more rage, more resolve. It felt like a tool I'd been issued and finally learned to use. Reporters gathered. Ms. Carter, one called. "Are you satisfied?" "No," I said. I'm encouraged. Satisfaction is for endings. This is a beginning. Ethan took my hand as we moved through the questions and into the next set of doors. On the other side, drafts to approve council to coordinate a call with Horizon's board to explain why our deal just got bigger and better, not smaller. Opportunity, yes, but not the kind that arrives wrapped. The kind you build rivet by rivet until it can fly. Character growth rarely announces itself with trumpets. The morning after the airport gauntlet, I walked into NorthStar's maintenance hangar at 5:40 a.m., where night shift was handing off today. The air smelled like hydraulic fluid and coffee. Grease-streaked mechanics looked up surprised that an executive had found their corner. I didn't bring a speech. I brought a notepad and 2 questions. What slows you down? What makes you feel small? A tech named Luis pointed at a clipboard, then at his chest. Work orders get believed. People don't. I wrote his sentence down and drew a box around it. Ethan, who had ditched his tie for a fleece and safety goggles, asked for examples. The floodgates opened not as a grievance session, but as stories. A female mechanic explained how she learned to stand slightly apart during morning jokes so she could not be drafted into laughing. A veteran with a hearing aid admitted he avoided filing safety notes because he didn't want to be labeled slow. Henry there in civvies listened with the alert stillness I'd seen on Final Approach. Growth asks, where did my silence train other people to be silent? Grace's growth looked different. She had volunteered for the crew council and arrived to the first meeting with a folder of sticky notes collected from flight attendants across bases. Some of us don't speak up because we think we'll have to relive everything she said. What if the intake form lets us choose bullet points instead of paragraphs? She wasn't reducing the pain. She was engineering dignity. By noon, we had a prototype checkboxes for behavior sliders for impact and a box labeled, "Tell it in your words if you want." Grace grinned like a person who had found a lever she wasn't afraid to pull. Eleanor's growth surprised even her. She was used to entering rooms as the sharp instrument, the person who knew the statute number by heart. Now she started a brown bag series called Case Files of the Heart, where she taught young attorneys how to interview without turning people into exhibits. Your first job is to protect their story from you, she told them. Ask shorter questions. Don't fish for drama. Fish for facts that will stand up in fluorescent lighting. Watching her trade theatre for craft reminded me that maturing isn't getting louder. It's learning which volume makes the truth easiest to hear. Matthew's growth did not photograph well, which was the point. He stopped delegating the hard rooms. He showed up at 2 a.m. to watch ramp agents de-ice a tail in sleet. When a station manager tried to hand him a choreographed walkthrough, he pocketed the packet and rode the tug anyway. In a meeting with his own lieutenants, he said the sentence that makes or breaks a leader, "I was wrong." Then he added the sentence that keeps it from being theatre. "Here is how I will be measured next quarter." You could feel the air change. Accountability finally had a name tag. Victoria's growth was sharper. She began carrying a small card she called the "one more step." Whenever an executive proposed a response, she asked, "What is the step after this that proves this wasn't cosmetic?" If they couldn't answer the plan, went back. At the next board meeting, she moved the culture metrics above revenue on the agenda. No one missed the symbolism. She and I sparred only once over whether to publish redacted chat logs. I wanted sunlight. She wanted privacy for innocent names. We compromised excerpts with context, plus an external repository where employees could privately review unredacted records with counsel present. Ethan's growth looked the quietest and cost him the most. The day after we announced Clear Air, a prominent pundit branded him a sellout who wanted woke points. He didn't clap back. He called our head of finance and cut his own bonus tie to the culture metrics we had just published. He started eating lunch in different departments 3 times a week. He asked the same question every time. What's one thing you wish I knew that people don't say in meetings? He wrote the answers by hand and circled patterns. My own growth was messier. I had learned to step around slights the way you step around puddles in heels without looking down. Now I was choosing to stop, look, and name the water. That meant running out of patience with past me, the version who accepted compliments for being resilient like that, was a virtue instead of a tax. I started ending keynotes with a personal practice I called the 30-second brace. I invited rooms full of leaders to sit in silence for half a minute, imagining their most junior employee walking into their office to report misconduct. When the silence ended, we wrote the first sentence we'd say. The first time I tried it at NorthStar's headquarters, a young supervisor came up afterward with tears like he hated them. My first sentence was, "Are you sure?" he said. "I want it to be, thank you for coming to me." That was growth recognizing the reflex and replacing it on purpose. I wrote his 2 sentences on a whiteboard and left them up all week. By Friday, someone had added a third. Here's what happens next. We were building muscle memory instead of slogans. That sounded small. It felt huge. Muscles move airplanes, posters don't. Raven's growth stayed anonymous, but it changed shape. Messages came now with attachments labeled like grocery lists. Snow Day Toolbox Spare Parts. Each unlocked a drawer. One showed how complaints had been routed to a resolution team whose real function was to neuter them. Another revealed shift-swapping patterns that punished whistleblowers with childcare hostile overnights. We moved fast without being sloppy. The outside firm imaged drives. The Oversight Council verified summaries and published what we could. Every time a rumour flared, we met it with receipts. Cynicism didn't vanish, but it began to lose its swagger. Doubt hates details. The public storm kept throwing new weather. Whitmore sat for interviews repeating the word misunderstood until it lost its syllables. When a commentator tried to bait me on live television with a question shaped like a trap, "Is the real problem white men?" I didn't blink. "The real problem is people who confuse power with permission," I said. "And the real solution is structure that makes decency cheaper than cruelty." The host paused and then nodded before moving on. Viewers wrote in not to praise the clapback, but to ask for the checklist. Older travellers told us they chose routes by crew reputation. Growth was measuring the right things. 6 weeks after the flight, we held a small ceremony no one live-streamed. In a training room that still smelled like fresh paint, Henry pinned new bars to his collar promotion overdue by years and earned by every mile he'd flown in quiet excellence. He didn't give a speech. He shook hands with the junior pilots first. Grace accepted a new role leading customer care practice with budget real enough to buy time, not pastries. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it to one sentence: "Let this be normal." And then we went back to work that day. The day we announced the merger, there were no fireworks, no balloons, just a stage lectern and a screen that read "Clear Air" in letters big enough to be read from the back of a crowded union hall. We streamed it to every hangar gatehouse and break room in the network. The first slide was not the deal price, it was a checklist. Ethan delivered the bones audits, dashboards, published ladders, the Raven protocol compensation tied to culture. Matthew owned the failures without softening the verbs. Victoria described the Oversight Council's authority in sentences you could measure with a ruler. I spoke last and kept it to one promise: you will not have to be a hero to be treated like a person on our planes. Afterward, we didn't linger. Announcements feel good. Implementation holds you to it. The Oversight Council moved into an office with glass walls and a door that never quite latched. Eleanor chaired the first listening session, then the second. Grace's crew council wrote intake questions, tore them up, and wrote better ones. Henry flew 2 turns, then came home to pilot check-ride sims built around dignity as a safety factor, not a feel-good slide at the end. The first quarter hurt. Complaints went up, not down, proof that people believed someone would read them. Commentators mistook volume for failure. We called it baseline. The second quarter, the numbers started to tell a different story. Faster response times, fewer insufficient evidence closures, a drop in resolved informally, because informally is where things go to be forgotten. The dashboard didn't flatter us. It organised our honesty. The union found its lane. Adrian held office hours in airports he'd never visited before, sat with pilots who resented the noise, and with pilots who had waited 20 years for someone to say the quiet part out loud. He and Eleanor argued about a case in Phoenix until both of them learned something. then co-wrote a guidance note on due process that became the model for the rest of the system. Protect the record, protect the person, protect the cockpit. Raven kept sending shorter notes now, with fewer screenshots and more instructions for where to look. Then one Tuesday, a final message. You don't need me to be brave for you anymore. People are using their own names. No signature, no attachment. I stared at the line until it blurred. Anonymous courage had gotten us started. Shared courage would keep us moving. We started to hear stories from outside our walls. A ground crew chief at a competitor copied our idea and posted a local clear air board where ramp agents could file safety and dignity notes together. A regional airline published complaint metrics unprompted. A flight school in Arizona launched a scholarship they didn't name after anyone. They called it Open Door and printed the application in 3 languages. The industry wasn't reborn. It was adjusting its course 1 degree at a time, which is how you move a jet without spilling anyone's coffee. Some days the progress felt like weather noticeable, in aggregate, not in the moment. On a midweek hop to Denver, a gate agent who didn't recognize me redirected a man who called a trainee sweetheart, with the kind of calm that comes from practice, not performance. At a maintenance base, a supervisor stopped a joke before the punchline and replaced it with a question, "What problem are you trying to solve by saying that out loud?" In the crew lounge, I watched a young pilot introduce his mentor, a woman 20 years his senior, without qualifying adjectives. "This is my mentor, Captain Romero." Period. The personal repairs were quieter and mattered more. I received a note on linen paper from 4A Don, written in block letters that tried to behave. The nurse says, "My heart is fine if I behave." My wife says my mouth too. I told my grandkids what I said and why it was wrong. I told them what you did. Thank you for not leaving us behind on that plane. He enclosed a donation to the bridge program with a sticky note. Maybe this pays for someone's fuel. Grace sent me a photo of a whiteboard from a training room, first sentence at the top. Underneath, 3 lines in different handwritings. Thank you for coming to me. Here's what happens next. You are not alone. She captioned it, Muscle Memory Unlocked. Henry texted me a selfie before a red-eye new bars catching the cabin light, no caption. He didn't need one. Later, when he was tapped to lead flight standards, he asked to keep 1 leg a month on the line. I don't want the job to talk about the job more than the job is the job, he said. And it made perfect sense to anyone who has ever been tempted to live off the flight deck and into the conference room. Ethan grew lighter, not softer. He let the company be visible in its effort, not perfect in its self-regard. On a live call with investors, he was asked whether all this culture work was a distraction from margins. He said, "Margins are math. Math improves when humans have the conditions to do their best work." That's this. The stock dipped, then didn't. The analysts adjusted their models to include retention, fewer lawsuits, better on-time arrivals, because fewer sick calls were actually, "I can't face that base manager today." Numbers don't have morals, but they do have inputs. The moment that turned my private hope into proof didn't happen on a stage. It happened at Gate 17B in Dallas on a Saturday. A black teenage girl stood next to her mother, both dressed like they were going somewhere important and refusing to be rushed. The girl watched a crew board Korean-American captain, Latina first officer, white lead attendant with sleeves of tattoos peeking from under his blazer. A ramp team that looked like a crowded family cookout where everyone brought a different accent. She didn't stare. She studied. She squeezed her mother's hand. The mother said, as if narrating the most normal thing in the world, "See, that could be you." I didn't walk over. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't make it about me. I just stood there for a moment, ridiculously happy to be unnecessary to their next sentence. 6 months after the flight, we hosted an event that wasn't a victory lap. It was a handoff. The Oversight Council opened the microphone to anyone who had used the new systems, successfully or not. A former flight attendant who'd left years ago came back to tell her story and get her letter, the one that said, "We believe you. And we were late. And here is our apology with a check that says, we understand time has cost you money." She cried. Not because of the amount, because of the sentence with "we" and "we're late" in it. Accountability is a language. We were learning its grammar. Reporters kept trying to find a single man to pin this on: the villain, the hero, the puppet master. We kept returning to structure. The one notable exception came from a local paper that interviewed ramp workers, gate agents, and mechanics, and called the piece "The People Who Fixed the Air." It quoted, "Luis work orders get believed. People don't. Now people get a turn." I taped that line inside my notebook. The pushback didn't vanish. A lawsuit landed with a thud and then fizzled when screenshots met daylight. A cable panel shouted about overcorrection, and we didn't answer because we were busy building. Someone spray painted a slur on a hangar door. We cleaned it, then posted a photo of the cleanup crew smiling with brooms and a caption that read, "We prefer clear air." The crew started calling themselves the Clear Air Team and added the photo to the new hire orientation deck, not as shame, but as instruction. There will be more messes. Grab a broom. On a Sunday morning flight to Boston, the captain made an announcement I hadn't heard before. "Folks, thanks for flying with us. Our job is to get you there safely and on time, with your dignity intact. If we fall short, tell us. We're measured on that." You could feel passengers sit a little taller the way people do when someone says out loud the thing they're all hoping is true. I still get angry. I still rehearse conversations in the shower I'll never actually have. Some days the old reflexes reach for me: be the exception, make yourself small, be grateful. Those days, I take out the napkin I folded on the plane, the one I used to blot a stain while someone filmed, while someone called into a news network, while someone else decided whether to be brave. It's still creased a little champagne-scented. I keep it not as a relic, but as a tool. It reminds me that steadiness is a choice. We ended the year with a smaller ceremony than any of the press wanted. In a hangar strung with cafe lights borrowed from the employee events closet, we honoured the first class of bridge scholars. 50 names, 50 faces, 50 different ways to imagine a cockpit, a tower, a maintenance bay. A mother hugged me like I had come to a birth. "He'll be the first to fly in our family," she whispered. "Not just on a plane, in one." I thought of the girl at gate 17B and hoped someone would say the same sentence to her when the time came. On the last slide of our end-of-year report, we didn't put a trophy. We put a door. It was open. You could see daylight through it and a strip of sky. The caption read, "We keep it open together." People like to ask what changed most for me. It wasn't the merger or the headlines or the boardroom fights that ended in handshakes and new budgets. It was something smaller in rooms where I used to accept the compliment that I was resilient. I now say, I'm resolute. Resilience can be a demand put on the harmed. Resolve is a decision made by the whole. When I fly now, I still choose 2A when I can. I still dress like the first impression matters because habits are sticky. But I don't steel myself the same way at the jet bridge. Clear air isn't a promise that you'll never meet a storm. It's a promise that when the storm comes, the plane you're on has been designed to fly through it without pretending the turbulence is your fault. As we lifted off on the last flight of the year, no cameras, no microphones, just the hum that lives in the bones of an aircraft. Ethan laced his fingers with mine. The wing caught the light and turned it into a silver line. We climbed steady, and the city below blurred into the thing. It always was a place full of rooms where people are deciding what kind of air other people will breathe. We chose. We keep choosing, and the air is clearer because of it. One flight didn't cancel a man. It confronted a system. The real lesson from Sophia and Ethan's ordeal is simple dignity is a design choice. Cultures don't drift toward justice. They drift toward convenience. Captain Whitmore's slur was not a thunderbolt out of nowhere. It was the last loose shingle on a roof neglected for years. NorthStar began to change when people stopped narrating outrage and started engineering guardrails, visible rules outside oversight, transparent ladders, retaliation penalties that actually bite. Notice who moved first. Grace spoke. Eleanor named the law. Henry told the truth about promotions. Victoria chose receipts over optics. Matthew said, I was wrong. Ethan tied money to behaviour. Sophia refused to shrink. Each choice was small, specific and repeatable. That's how storms become blue sky, not by speeches, but by checklists everyone can follow. The deeper truth is humbling and hopeful. Most harm is ordinary, so most repair can be too. Replace secrecy with sunlight, heroics with process vibes, with measurements and apologies with timetables. If you manage people, build a door and hold it open. If you ride in any system, demand to see its bolts. Justice is not a mood. It is maintenance performed on schedule. Daily. Start where you stand. If you witness bias in public, do 3 things. Document name and hand off. Record discreetly. State the behaviour, not the label captain that was a racial slur. Then escalate to someone with authority and ask for the policy by name. If you're a bystander, borrow Eleanor's line. We all heard it. If you manage people, adopt the first sentence. Thank you for coming to me. Here's what happens next. Post it at your desk until it's reflex. Build a simple checklist for your team, reporting channels, timelines, who reads what, how retaliation is tracked. Tie at least one manager metric to dignity, not just output. If you're the target, conserve energy. Pick your moments, invite a witness, and write a summary to send the same day. Finally, replace performative outrage with receipts, screenshots, dates, names, outcomes. Systems change when stories arrive with evidence. Use them relentlessly. If this story aligns with your values, like, subscribe and share to keep clear air conversations moving. Drop a comment. What's your first sentence when someone reports harm to you? Your answer might become someone's new reflex.